All right, welcome back here to the Gill Connections Track and Field Podcast. Before we get started, hey, how about a shout out for our intro music? Man, I am just so pumped here in season 4 that we've got like real professional, real 100% authentic intro music. And that was done by someone just like you. That was actually done by track and field coach over at East Carolina University, Mr. Udon Cheek. He's an amazing, amazing artist, as well as a pretty fantastic track coach. In fact, they just set the school record in the 200, which was a pretty salty 200 record. So go check him out. If you know him, just go tell him thanks. He did a great job for us, and I'm just so grateful for him. If you don't know him, you need to know Mr. Udon Cheek. He is awesome, awesome person, awesome, awesome artist, and I'm just so thankful and so grateful for what he did for us here at the Gill Track and Field Connections podcast. I'm so humbled to be your host, Mike Cunningham here, National Business Development Manager for Gill Athletics, and probably most known for being the Twitter guy and also the podcast guy. And we are here on the Connections podcast to uplift and honor coaches from around the country. And today, well, buckle up. So we got a throws coach today, and typically with throws coaches, we get a little more amped up. Go back and listen to people like RIP Judd Logan we've had on the podcast, Lance Deal. You know, the throws coaches bring a little bit more energy today. So help me welcome the throws coach, assistant coach from the Vols, man, the University of Tennessee. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Eric Whitsitt. Eric, how are you, man?
Doing great. Definitely excited to sit down and always catch up with you.
Yeah, man, this will be fun because sometimes we have guests on here that I've never met before. This is our kind of our first introduction. You and I have known each other for quite a while now, through a lot of ups and downs, and have developed kind of a not just a professional relationship, but I don't know, maybe I'm going to I'll be wrong on air right here. I would consider us friends as well. Is that fair?
No, absolutely. Going back to those Illinois State days and, being able to tour the facility with you and, the early days of finding the ins and outs of what makes Gill so special. But, also the relationship we've, developed at numerous track meets throughout the past decade plus.
Yeah, man. I love it. I love it. Well, man, I'm so happy to get you here. We've been working back and forth to get this on the schedule for quite a while. And when we're recording this, so if you're listening probably during the week of the NCAA Division I championships down in Austin, Texas. So I know I'll see you down there, Eric. When we're recording this, we've actually just finished conference, which I can't wait to talk to you about SEC conference. As a former SEC coach myself, I know just what a bloodbath that meet is, and I had it easy. We only had 12 teams when I was in it. It's harder now, and it's about to get even harder with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. So I definitely want to talk to you about the SEC championships. But we're getting go into first round of championships. So you're going to be down at Jacksonville, right? University of North Florida.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we head out early next week with the team that's qualified and try to see how many kids we can get through.
I love it, man. That's another tough one. North Florida, I love. What a gorgeous facility. I love that they have that there in Jacksonville. But another tough meet, just survive in advance, and then perform in, probably the 120 degree heat that we'll have in Austin.
Yeah, and the regional championships is kind of what sets the elite athletes from the rest. Only having 3 attempts. Not relying on trying to find an early groove and hit a big throw in finals. You got 3 and done to be in the top 12. So definitely, a pressure cooker type situation.
Hey, that's a good question. And, knowing that we don't talk X's and O's, but before we get into your journey, that actually just kind of made me think about it, because I forgot they went down to 3 throws. It used to be 3 and 3 and all that kind of stuff, like traditional. Do you, because you brought up a good point about like rhythm and, maybe even intensity and excitability of the athlete. Do you have to, as we think about our field eventers, do you have to coach differently at the regional because you only get 3? Do you do something different with your coaching?
In my mind, I think the emphasis is a lot more about warm-ups and the continuation of warm-ups to that first and second throw. A lot of times you can get through some warm-ups and get through 1 or 2 throws and then try to find a rhythm getting into finals. And then typically what you see are huge throws in finals, especially on that 5th and 6th round when kids start to get a little bit more comfortable. For me personally, and in my experiences, the importance of the warm-ups and the preparation of warm-ups, even leading through practice and trying to come out with intensity on throw number 1, just to set the tone early and try to get amped and try to get into the competition early. it is a little bit different of a mindset in how we approach it for sure.
Do we see, I'm imagining I've coached some field event. I've coached some pretty good long jumpers and triple jumpers, but not throwers. Do we see athletes who are better at the first three versus better at the last three? Meaning, I can imagine an athlete who almost needs to get warmed up in their first three throws before they, we've seen some just amazing round 4, 5, 6 battle. One person throws far and then everybody gets amped up and everybody starts throws far. And then I'm also imagining an athlete who, just because of the way they're made up physiologically and psychologically, that their first three throws are always their better throws, and they don't do as well in the last three, so they kind of got to get it done early. It seems like we're changing the meat by doing three throws versus all the other times doing six for those athletes, of a caliber to make it to finals. Do you see, like, do kids sneak in or get snuck out because of the three throws versus 3+3?
No, absolutely. And I think of it, the main point is it leads to experience. The kids that have been there and done that, the previous year, the year before, tend to go into that meet a little bit more relaxed. The new kids, this might be their first time qualifying for a regional meet. Those kids, soaking up that experience and having that experience, I think is key in how to handling those three attempts for sure.
That's interesting. Well, I'm on record as not being a fan of regionals. What about you? Are you a fan or not a fan?
I've been around a lot of coaches, especially at Oregon. They hated the regional format, but I've always loved it. And I guess that's because I've had quite a few athletes over my career sneak in those high 30s to 40 spots. I've had a kid in a regionals as high as 43, and sneak in and have big PRs, whether it was at Illinois State or even at Oregon, and I believe it was 2019. Max Lightem had a big PR just to qualify for regionals. Was in the very first flight, ranked 42, 43, and on his last throw, the third throw of his competition, hit a 3-meter PR and snuck into the national championship meet his senior year, his first trip ever going. So, I've had probably pretty close to 10, 12 athletes that were outside of the top 30. Sneak into that meet just by showing up and hitting big throws.
Somewhere there's a person who finished 13th at that regional and is telling the opposite story. It's like, yeah, this kid come out of nowhere and PRs by 3 meters. I was set I was going to nationals and then I didn't.
No, absolutely. And, I've been on the other end of that too, quite a few 13ths outdoors and quite a few 17ths indoors. And those spots are definitely heartbreaking, especially when you're looking within centimeters. I had a girl miss a national championship in 2014 by 1 centimeter in the shot put.
Dude, I mean,
blade of a grass.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's good perspective. Oh my. All right, Eric, let's jump in, man. Let's learn more about your journey here. You actually, again, we know each other fairly well. You have an amazing, really legendary journey in regards to people that have poured into you. Somewhere along the way, knowing that you were an athlete, you were a really good thrower, coaching had to change for you. It had to go from something in your head of where coach just tells me what to do, go lift this, go throw that, to where it was like, oh, wait a minute. Like I could be a coach. Like maybe that could be a profession for me. Where does coaching begin for you as a thought of like, I could do this?
Originally my plan in college was to be a high school history teacher and a football coach. I had great experiences from my high school, and my first couple of years of high school definitely wasn't the greatest student, and we had some high school coaches that kept tapping on my shoulder and expressing their levels of potential for myself. And first of all, it started in the classroom. So to have those type of people take interest in me and tell me that I could do some things maybe that I wasn't thinking about and rise up to a different level of whether it was football or track and field. I hold a lot of those early coaches, dear to my heart. And, again, I wanted to be a high school history teacher. My throws coach and football coach in high school was a history teacher. So I kind of wanted to just, emulate his footsteps and help high school kids. I graduated from Boise State, and Mike Maynard had got a call from Ty Seaven, who was the head coach at McNeese at the time. And, he was heading out to the Olympic Training Center. He had basically called Mike and said, hey, do you have anybody graduating? We're looking for a throws coach out here at McNeese. And, in my mind, the first thing that clicked is, wait, I can get a job right away, and I can coach track and field. I don't have to apply for teaching jobs and try to figure, the landscape in high school teaching out. Sure, I'll go out and figure that out. Let's do it.
Well, let's go back. So in high school, you were football plus track, and you had this great coach. And we almost called this the shout out podcast. So if I know it's been a while, we're getting an age, Eric, but if you remember his name, would love to know coach's name.
I definitely remember his name. I named my son after his surname. So his name was Timothy Graham, and he passed away a few years ago from brain cancer.
Oh,
He was, and he followed me throughout my whole college career. He drove from Colorado out to Sacramento to watch me throw my senior year at Boise State at the national championships. And he was somebody that we probably talked with or texted with back and forth, multiple times a month, and, kept in touch my whole coaching career until he passed away. And it was actually my wife's idea, because she knew how important he was to be in my life, that, why don't we name our son Graham, after Tim Graham's surname. And so that's what we did.
you know, the positive impact a coach makes on young people, whether that's in middle school, high school, college, even on the pro circuit, it really is immeasurable. So to hear that story, that the impact Coach Graham had on you, and what I love about it is that it was your wife's idea, who was not coached by, but so that tells me like she could see the impact that he made on you and therefore made on your family. So to hear that is really, I mean, that is amazing, Eric, really is. What was it, as you think now back on his coaching style? We all have a different style, not just the X's and O's that we know, but how we communicate and act with our athletes. What was it that impacted you? Was he a drill sergeant type of style? Was he a nurturing? What was it that you wanted to be a high school coach and teacher because of history, because of him? What was it that really you wanted to emulate?
I think it was a combination of the tough, but the love. My father passed away when I was really, really young. And so, primarily growing up in a single family household, or a single parent household, a majority of my life, getting to high school and having somebody like that was, one, tough, but then two, expressing that he cared for me, and wanted good things for me, and wanted, me to have a route and path in life to be successful. And always being on me, always making sure that I was turning in my homework, always making sure I was showing up to practice on time, basically preparing for me to be a responsible adult in the future. I remember car rides where a lot of local track meets, had very low level competition. And, he would drive me up to Denver, just me and him in the car, to compete at big championship, big high caliber meets in Denver, to compete against the best. And, he just wanted me to get that experience. And, he sacrificed a lot of time and money. We didn't have a whole lot of support for our track team financially in high school. And, he bought me discs and bought me shot puts and all the training equipment for me to feel like I had the best to compete with the best. So, he definitely took a lot of time and effort out to help me, and, a lot of things that he didn't have to do.
If you're a coach listening right now, I know sometimes it can be hard to think that you're making an impact, that the kids appreciate what you do. Listen to that story. You are someone's Coach Graham. We're not always going to verbalize it when we're 14, 15, 16, 18, heck, sometimes 22, sometimes 32 at years of age. But trust me, you make an impact. That really is an amazing story. So you said you go to Boise State. Did you grow up in Idaho or Colorado? You're mentioning both.
Colorado.
Yeah.
I grew up in Colorado, public Colorado, and out of high school, again, our track coaches always tried to get us out of Colorado to compete against the best. So we used to go to the Simplot games at Idaho State, and my sophomore, junior, and senior year, I competed out in the Simplot games. And I originally signed with Idaho State, so I went to Idaho State for 3 years. My freshman, sophomore, junior year, it's where I met my wife, Casey. She was an incoming pole vaulter in the track team as well. Right around my junior year, I suffered an injury, and we kind of reloaded. All my wife's parents were from the Boise Payette area, and we were married at the time. Got married pretty early in our lives. So we dated for a couple of weeks actually before I asked her to marry me. I had a 9-month engagement. We've been married close to 18 years now, but we wanted to get closer to family, and so we transferred to Boise State my last 2 years.
Now, coaches are famous for on both males and females saying, "Hey, stay away from the boys, stay away from the girls, don't have boyfriends, don't have girlfriends." You got married. How did that affect you and Casey athletically? Like, did that help you guys? Were there frustrations? I mean, that's marriage is a very tough thing to have. It's a totally different world here. Having kids is the next one, and we'll get to that with you guys eventually. But how was that being married on the team?
It is definitely a weird dynamic, but I think it provides you with a different level of support, a more personal level of support when you go home at night. Your significant others there. And, it was definitely a growing process for two young kids. Like you said, she was an incoming freshman and I was a redshirt sophomore, when we met at the first track meeting of the season that year. And, we were married within that year. So, it was definitely a learning adjustment for sure. First time living with somebody of the opposite sex in an apartment, but I feel like that kind of bonded us even more to figure out life early on together, and having somebody right by your side to help you through the bad times as well as to support you when you head home from a meet with the good times.
Well, I can't imagine she's not listening to this podcast when it's out. So I got to put it on wax here. Was it love at first sight?
It was, I asked her out, within the first couple of days, actually. And, our very first date, she actually sat down and said, "I'm not looking for a serious relationship." Stacy DeGila was an assistant pole vault coach at Idaho State at the time. And, I'm looking to be the best athlete I can be. And, we went out to dinner and a movie and then a couple of more dates. And, there's the history there.
That's awesome. I love that she like put the ground rules down. Look, I'm not looking for anything. Oh yeah, we'll be married in like 6 months, man.
Yeah, the first time I ever met her dad, actually, I had the galls to drive up and meet him for the first time to ask him if I could marry his daughter. Yep.
Dude, and what a what an amazing story of like been married now for 18 years. Like it's been successful. I mean, that's oh man. Maybe that's a lesson for coaches when your new freshman says, "Hey, I like that boy," or "I like that girl," and maybe you bless it. I don't know. Maybe more go bad than good. I'm not sure. We're talking about 18-year-olds here, so be careful. So you're in college, you start at Idaho State, transfer to Boise State, you're studying history. The plan is I'm going to be a high school teacher and coach. Now, are you playing football at all at Idaho State or Boise State?
No, once I got to college, I was just a thrower. Yep.
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's a tough, always when I see these kids that are doing more than one sport in college. I mean, it's unbelievable. Even something as uh, complimentary as football and track, it's still like, man, that's a workload. Plus, by the way, you're going to school. Okay, so legend of a coach there at Boise State. That's one of the people I wanted to talk about, Mike Maynard. I mean, Mike Maynard's coaching tree is one of the more lots of branches, lots of former athletes have become coaches. What was it like when you started working with Coach Maynard there at Boise State?
It was almost a seamless transition for me. A lot of tough love, but that tough love came from caring. He didn't say anything that he didn't mean, and ultimately he wanted the best for all of his kids. He saw potential in his kids, and if you were doing something wrong, he was quick to put you in line, and had a lot of expectations, and with those expectations came a lot of hard work. But at the end of the day, he expressed that belief, and if you cross your eyes or if you cross your T's and dot your I's, that you can do things that maybe you didn't think you could do.
Yeah, you were a history major, not an English major, so it's okay if
Nope.
you cross your I's and dot your T's. That
Yep.
works. I'm from Alabama, so who am I to judge on grammar and spelling and whatnot? So I'm always interested in people like a Mike Maynard. I think about like North Central with the coaching staff that they recently retired, but have had there. These coaches and coaching staffs that seemingly put out so many coaches, so many of their athletes go on to be college and high school coaches. There's a few that are just really special like that. What do you think? Kind of looking back now, you've had a long, successful career at this point, and many years ahead of you here. When you look at how Mike worked with his athletes, prepared his athletes, talked to his athletes. What is it, do you think, about Mike that has made so many move on to college and high school coaching positions, successful coaching positions, by the way, as well?
The level of importance in preparation, knowing the why you're doing something and the when you need to do it, and should you do it just because you can do it. I remember entering my senior year when he had got that phone call and asked if he had anybody graduating that was looking to coach, and primarily my emphasis was just the shot put. I didn't throw discus in college, I didn't throw any of the other events, and he sat down and said, if this is something you want to do, you need to start learning, and I can help you learn how to coach, this last year. And so I, constructed my academic schedule and my training schedule around some of his other events, around hammer events and javelin events. And, a lot of times I would show up to those other practices. I would be done with my shot practice and I would just kind of linger around the track and watch how he coached the jab kids, watch how he coached the hammer kids. And just kind of learned how he talked to those kids individually, and finding individual programming and the things that work for, each and every kid, not just having a standard set of this is what everybody does. I think Mike did a great job of figuring out the individual athlete and devising a training plan that he thought could fit that athlete's natural tendencies and experiences and qualities. So, I take that into my coaching now. I don't have a standard, training plan. Every one of my kids, after a couple of months and I get to learn their ticks, we develop an individualized training plan. And that's something I feel like I got from Mike.
Now, that's interesting. Recently, probably about a month ago, someone on Twitter posted that if you didn't participate in the event, that you can't coach it. Now, we know that's bunk, and you go back to amazing guests that we've had. Boosh Exnader, one of the top 5 coaches in the world, and was not a jumper at all, and can coach the jumps pretty good, right? It's interesting because I think of you as a very holistic throws coach. Like, there's a lot of great throws coaches that do really, really well in the shot and the discus. And that makes sense, right? Because here in America, in high school, every state in high school, we've got shot in the disc. Some can have picked up the hammer in college, because we have that in college, but not really in high school here in America, and do a really good job. And hammer is one of my favorite events. I love that. And then there's the tougher one, the bastard child of throwing, this javelin, which is, it's not rotational at all. It's more linear. It's more like a long jump than it is a throw kind of thing, all that kind of stuff. But you've been able to, I don't know if I want to use the word master, because I know how you feel about your craft of learning, but you've done really well in all 4 events. But I didn't know that you were primarily just a shot putter. I would have said for sure you did the discus, and I would have assumed you did the hammer, just because of Mike and throwing and things like that. Why just the shot? Was it, the Boise program was really, really good. Was it just because you had other great discus throwers and hammer throwers?
Well, after my freshman year of college, I had a pretty devastating shoulder injury and was basically out of throwing for probably 14, 15 months. So it took a lot of time to come back from that. And obviously, you lose some flexibility and some mobility, and you lose time. So it's, what do you focus on in your last couple of years of your career? Do you start to water down things with other events when you're basically picking up from scratch again, or, you have some tendencies in one event, you at least in your mind, how it should work. Let's just build that one back up.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So going back to what that tweet was about, if you didn't do the event, you can't coach it, blah, 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 which again, don't believe in it. But I'm curious, what are some of the things that you've had to do to overcome that? And what I mean by that is, you've done the shot put and you've rotated, so you maybe have some natural feeling of what rotation means for the discus and and maybe even the hammer, even though there's obviously some intricacies there. But you've done really, really well in the javelin. How have you, I don't want to say overcome, because I don't believe that if you didn't do the event, you can't coach it. But what are, how did you, when you first started, you go to McNeese. So let's actually jump toward McNeese. McNeese is a great example because, so first of all, you're in college, you got javelin, whether it's pure javelin throwers or javelin for the multis, and you're in the state of Louisiana, which does, one of the roughly 20 states that we have that does have high school javelin, meaning I assume McNeese gets more javelin throwers on their team than, say, Illinois, because we don't have it at all here in Illinois. What are some of the things that you had to maybe overcome or adapt to as you moved to the college ranks and had to coach all 4?
That was my biggest fear when I accepted that McNeese job. When I was looking at a roster of about 23 throwers, the 14 or 15 between the men and women were jab throwers, and I didn't know a lick about the javelin. Fortunately, I got up to Lake Charles about 2 months before school and training started, so a little bit earlier in the summer to prep for recruiting and things like that. And I ordered every Jav video and bought every Jav book, on the market that I could. With Duncan Atwood, Tom Petronoff, Tom Putskis. Probably spent several $100 on instructional Jav videos and books and just reading articles. And at the end of the day, everybody kind of goes about things differently. But when you start to piece different perspectives together, you find the 10, 15, or 20% that they do the same. Everybody does, quite a bit of things differently, but over the course of time, everybody does this the same. Everybody, looks at this emphasis the same. And so as a coach, when you have those type of authorities, all agreeing on one or two aspects of how things should be, in your mind, okay, that's going into my programming. And then after that, it's trying to figure things out and learn, a little bit as you go. I can't say enough about how much Tom Petronoff and Tom Putskis, helped me out through my career and gave me a lot of input. I still call those guys. I still send videos to those guys. I'm still on text messages asking, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And those type of guys have always been willing and able to reach out to me. I think they have a general love for the sport, and they just want to see the sport in the United States get better. So, those type of guys, you reach out to them and they just want to help you be better.
Yeah, I would agree and echo what you said specifically. I was going to say about Tom and Tom, but I can't throw out Duncan there as well. Just great
Nope.
people. Love that you had there speaking into you early, and it'll be interesting because Petronoff will actually play a story into this story here in the near future as well with you, Eric. Did you say Ty left McNeese, or was he there at McNeese with you when you were there?
No, Ty left. So Ty
Okay.
was the head coach at McNeese, and he left to be the throws coach out at the Olympic Training Center and the jumps coach. And they hired Brendan Gilroy, who is the assistant distance coach there. And so, Ty was looking for, some possibilities. And then when I went out there, I interviewed with Brendan and interviewed with the athletic director out there. And, basically they pretty much gave me the job on the spot.
Yeah, I was curious because Ty is another phenomenal. I mean, I'll say javelin, but just coach. I mean, the guy can coach anything, and so that'd have been another one that would have been good for you. And I'm sure you've talked with Ty since then, but that would have been a good one as well. Okay, so the whole goal up until now, before you get to McNeese, was to go coach high school and become, like your mentor back in high school, Coach Graham. But now you're in the college ranks and you're in a pretty good conference there with McNeese as well. What was it like? What was it like jumping in? And obviously you jumped in headfirst with education on javelin specifically, but what was it like just, okay, I've got to recruit. I'm dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, not 14 to 18-year-olds. I'm not teaching. History means nothing as it comes to what's on the track, my history major. What was it like jumping into the college ranks, Division I, right off the bat?
A lot of hours put in. If that's your first time coaching, it doesn't matter where you're coaching it or what level. It's about the hours and the grind is very real. Not only are you learning how to coach as a first time coach, but you're learning how the NCAA works. You're learning the NCAA rules, what you can and can't do. You're learning how recruiting goes. You're making 15, 20 calls a week, just trying to find talent and athletes. It's very, very time consuming, 50, 60, 70-hour weeks sometimes, especially when you start, just to get a crash course in what it's going to take. And as you know, I'm a very competitive guy. Even if I don't know how to do something, if I'm playing a game or, doing something that has something on the line, for myself, I'm trying to figure out how to get the advantage, as fast as I can and how to learn it as fast as I can, because I hate to lose at things. That's just my personality. My wife hates it because when we play a game of Monopoly or something at home, I'm the most competitive board game player there is. But that's just kind of in my blood. If I'm doing something, I want to beat everybody else when I'm doing it. So, I dove into it pretty hard to try to figure it out as fast as I could. Sure.
Yeah, I think when we typically hear competitiveness, we all like shake our head and like, oh yeah, that's a key ingredient for success. I like to think of it as controlled competitiveness, because over competitiveness can be a negative and a danger. Has your, and I know I know you well enough. You are competitive. I would never even play tiddlywinks with you if I wasn't secure enough that, like, all right, I might lose here because he's going to do everything he can to win this thinking game. Has your competitiveness, because you're really competitive here, Eric, has your competitiveness, as you look back a little bit with some perspective, ever bit you in the butt? Has there ever been a time where you're like, ooh, maybe I should have dialed it down to 9. I didn't have to be a 10 on this one.
That, as you know, I've now entered my 16th, 17th year of coaching. And looking back on that is taking the ego out of the equation, and being competitive. Yeah, it's one thing to be competitive and look at that side of things, but now I'm looking at the development and relationship with the athletes quite a bit more. As before, I was trying to compete with other throws coaches. If my kids could beat other throws coaches' kids, that's what I was trying to do. And yeah, my kids were having success but it's not about me anymore. And I think is over the last couple of years and getting into this game and building relationships with these athletes, that's quite a bit different, and it's something still I'm working on. But it's trying to take the personal ego out of the equation. Yeah, it's okay to be competitive, but at the end of the day, it's about the experiences of these kids, and more so the relationships that you're developing with them along the way.
Yeah, you're touching on a little bit of like the abundance mindset versus what's the alternative? The limited mindset, right? It's like I want to beat the other coaches' kids because there's only so many places, and there's only so
Yep.
many first places at conference, at nationals. The abundance mindset says, hey man, if I'm making my kids better, well, we'll let the cards fall what they can, because that's all I can have control over. So that's interesting. I appreciate that authenticity there. So how did it go? I'm just so curious. I know you, and I know your educational pursuits. It's part of your competitiveness. You are going to leave no stone unturned to make your athletes better. So I'm just curious, the first javelin practice you have at McNeese. So you got all these javelin throwers, and I'm pretty sure you probably had some fairly successful ones there as well that were pretty good, probably knew a little bit about how to throw, and how they were just coached, by the way, by Ty Saban. Again, one of the top coaches around. I hold Ty extremely high in his knowledge and coaching ability. And you're 22,
23, 24.
23, 24. So you're still a pup. You go to that first practice.
I had a couple of athletes a year or two younger than me.
Yeah. You got kids that could have been on your teammates last year, right? Exactly. What was it like that first practice? You got the McNeese shirt on. You're pumped. You're coaching college. Okay, boys and girls, Coach Whitsitt, not Eric, is here. Coach Whitsitt is here. What was that like?
Yeah, it was definitely a learn as you go. I think that first javelin practice in my mind, I had a certain level of fitness to throw the event. And, we started doing long runs, and we did several long runs a week. And it took me a while to figure out that we're not developing, slow twitch muscles.
No, you
So, yeah,
didn't.
that was a shock, the amount of running that we did that, my first year of coaching for that JAV group was definitely excessive.
Interesting. I appreciate you being, I always tell people, our guest here, there's no pre-question. So they get to tell their story the way they want to story. He didn't have to tell us. That's a pretty big faux pas. Like, I know there's a lot of coaches that they're going, oh my God, why would you do that? I did. I was like, what are you doing? That's interesting. Where did that come from? Because, we typically fall back to how we were coached when we first get into coaching. I have to assume, and I could be wrong here, that Mike wasn't doing that with his javelin throwers. Where did that
He
come
was
from?
not.
Yeah.
I can't quite tell you. Again, in my mind, it was a preconception that these guys needed to be fit, and it was before I started getting into my circuits and realizing
Right.
that short, quick, fast movements were the way to go. For my mind, we're going for a long run today, and we did probably 2 long runs a week, and racking up the miles like distance runners. We were probably putting in 8 to 10 miles a week with that javelin group. It's a wonder they even threw as far as they did. We actually threw pretty well. I had 2 freshmen, one kid that thrown 160, 170 feet in high school, go through 212 that year. But I don't know how he did it. He's just a talented kid.
He also PR'd in the mile. So, there's that.
Yep, he could have PR'd in the mile. Yep.
I always say, if after, and I don't know where the year mark, if it's like year 5, 10, 15, but after so many years coaching, if you don't look back at your first year or two of coaching and go, oh my God, what was I thinking? I don't think you're
Yeah.
coaching right. Because that means you're not developing. Because we're making mistakes today in year 15, 16 coaching. So you made mistakes year one. If you can't look back and be like, oh man, well,
To be
please
honest with you, Mike, I
apologize.
don't even think that there's one thing that I do today or the last 8 to 10 years that I did those first two. Probably not even one aspect.
I love it. I love it. Well, how many years were you there at McNeese, and how'd that go? That's a unique place to coach. It's a great place.
I was there for 2 years. So the 2007 and 2008 seasons, and we had a lot of success in all the events. Obviously we learned in the jab. We had some good young talent out there. But in the shot, the disc, we broke several school records those first couple of years, and ultimately got me a pretty quick opportunity to move up the chain to Illinois State.
Did you, during those first couple of years, and maybe even extended into Illinois State, which we'll get into here in a second, are you solidified that you're a college coach at this point, or is there any inkling of still like, I could still go back and coach high school, I'd still be cool with that, or any other myriad of opportunities that you might have?
I think the first year in my mind, all right, I got a job right off the bat. This is something to do. I'm getting paid to do it. I'm kind of figuring it out. The more I figured out in year two, I started to realize that this is something that I, could see myself doing for the next 20, 30 years. So again, you go back to the study and to the research and trying to figure out how to be better year two than you were year one. Across all the events, even in the shot put, that was an event that I did, and going and researching articles and looking at videos and looking at talks and seminars and coaching conventions on even the shot, trying to figure out ways to be better through the rotation, through the glide. It was that year too that after that first year where I kind of got the job, it was nice to not have to worry about an income and be able to support the family. To year two, kind of developing a passion that this is something that I could see myself doing for the rest of my life, for sure.
And you've been you're very prolific on Facebook, especially. I don't know, you're not on Twitter very much, which that hurts me because
Oh,
that's my domain. But you've been in the last several years, 5, 10, maybe 10 years, pretty vocal for something that I'm passionate about for coaches as well, and that's your physical health. Like every time you post your picture from Boise, I still don't believe it's you. I mean, you're a different person physically than you were in Boise. And obviously there's some differences between, in college, what you do and eat and lift for throwing versus what you do now as a coach. You've been real vocal about your health journey. When does that start? Is that starting here at McNeese or Illinois or future?
that really kind of started at Oregon.
Okay.
I graduated Boise State, probably a little closer to 300 plus pounds, and moved down to the south and probably gained some weight actually in the south and maintained that weight at Illinois State. When we moved to Oregon, quite a bit more health conscious, out there, just the general environment. And I think some of the staff were trying to push me on being healthy and eating better and training. We got these little Nike Fit Pods, and we started just a kind of a staff competition to see who could get in the most steps in each week. And again, I'm somebody that's pretty competitive. So when we had that little staff competition to see who could get the most steps in our little Fit Pods, with a dinner or a prize at the end of the season, you could bet I was getting my 15,000 to 2,000 to 20,000 steps in a day, whether I had to take a morning run or a night run or something like that. And within that first couple of years at Oregon, I lost 20 or 30 pounds. And, each year I probably lost another 10, 15 pounds and just kept at it. I was doing a lot of running, and then it kind of transitioned to where, I like to strength train and weight lift. And, I like to do circuits. I think that's a big part of my program and training athletes is circuits. So why don't I do the circuits? And I started doing my own circuits and started getting back into the weight room and lifting weights and, kind of switched up right around year 4, year 5 at Oregon.
When we get to Oregon, I want to touch on that more because that's just something I'm real passionate about is there's a lot of great opportunities out there for coaching education. So how to coach a thrower, how to coach distance runners, etc. And that's extremely needed because we got to continue to get better in our craft. I'm very, very passionate personally about a coach's other side of their health. So their physical health, their mental health, their relationship health, etc. So, I've always been, really proud of not only the journey you've been on for your health, but really proud that you have been public with it so other coaches can see, the transformation that you've had and the benefits of it. So I'd like to, when we get there, talk about like maybe any health issues you might have had that you're willing to share, and then what have been the benefits of that as well when we get to that point. But before we get there, you're right. You go south, so I hope you learned to drink sweet tea down there, because that is the absolute best thing in the whole world. Fried okra, come on, man. You got to make sure you eat that when you go down south. But then you get the opportunity to come up north, and this is actually where you and I first meet. You become the throws coach at the Redbirds, Illinois State University. Why switch? Why go from McNeese up to Illinois State?
Yeah, again, it kind of leads back to my competitive nature. When I realized that this is something that I wanted to do for the rest of my career, it's all right. How good can I get my kids to compete at this level and to provide different opportunities for my family? And again, this goes back to the early ego issues of why coach. I looked at coaching is how fast could I move up the ladder? The faster I get my kids to compete at this level, I knew that there would be opportunities to come around. And again, over the last couple of years, this emphasis on coaching is definitely turned more towards the relationship with your kids, and they get better and they have a good experience in knowing that you can change their lives in different ways, just like my life was changed early on. But after that first year at McNeese, I realized that McNeese wasn't going to, it was a great opportunity, a great school. We loved the South, but really far away from family. All of our family from Colorado, from Idaho. So, looking for, different opportunities. And again, this kind of goes back to, developing relationships at the Illinois State. Jeff Bovey, he was a distance runner at Arizona when Mike Maynard was the throws coach at Arizona. And so I remember Jeff reaching out to Mike saying, hey, our throws coach has taken another job. He had just moved up the chain. And, is there anybody out there that you would recommend us taking a peek at? And again, he kind of threw my name in the hat. I've had those pretty good 2 years at McNeese, and got those kids better and broke some school records. And, obviously that relationship and the trust that when Mike, throws out a name that he think that can get the job done, provided me an opportunity at Illinois State.
I did not know that. That's really interesting about the Bovey Maynard connection. That's really cool. And shout out to Jeff Bovey, and I'm sure you'll say a lot of good things too. Just won another conference title there at Illinois State this past year. He just continues to do he was the assistant coach for a while, and now the head coach continues to do a really good job of leading that program, and has some phenomenal athletes, and has had really phenomenal assistant coaches come through there as well. It's really impressive what Bovey's doing there at Illinois State. Appreciate what he's doing. So you get up to Illinois State. Now, I don't remember, because Illinois State has had really good throwers for quite a while. I know during your stretch, and we'll talk about some of them really good, but I think right before you, they had some really good ones, and they've continued. What was it like going into Illinois State? A little different. You don't have as many javelin throwers as McNeese, because again, we don't have it here in Illinois, but you have a full throws program. I mean, you got all 4 throws and then the multis and things like that. And you're in not the Ohio Valley, Missouri Valley?
Missouri Valley. Yep.
Missouri Valley. You're in a different conference. What was that transition like coming up there to the great state of Illinois?
It was good. It was fun. Obviously that recruiting class the following year coming in with a bunch of really talented freshmen. You had Tim Glover. You had Lee Petronoff, who was a redshirt sophomore. Coming into Kurt Jensen, just the rawest kid out of high school in the shot. Brittany Smith, somebody that a lot of big schools overlook. But those kids were excited about Illinois State. A lot of those kids were from, the state of Illinois, and they had a lot of pride in a lot of work ethic, and being around those type of kids that would just show up every day and just grind was kind of a coach's dream. Yes sir, no sir, and man, did they train their hearts out for sure. But even though I didn't have as many Jav kids, having Tom Patronoff's daughter, making sure that those I's were dotted and T's were crossed. I remember being on the phone with him probably every week, going over training. Eric, hey, what are you writing up for training today? I want to see, having those type of conversations. And obviously that's kind of where I started developing my relationship with Tom Putskis a little bit more as well. With him being up in the Chicago area, I didn't have as many javelin throwers, but, I kind of feel like those first couple of years at Illinois State is really where I start to develop a javelin program. We're now, 10, 15 years, 12 years later, a lot of what I did at Illinois State, I continue to do today.
Yeah, that's what, and there's a lot of athletes to touch on, and we won't touch on all of them because we'll forget 2 to 3 of them that deserve to be talked about. But I do want to talk about it. It is an interesting situation to be in, coaching Lee Petronoff, when Lee's dad is world record holder, phenomenal javelin thrower, knows the javelin inside and out. Here I don't ever want to coach Carl Lewis's son in the long jump. I don't want to coach, I don't want to coach Trey Hardy and Chelsea Hardy have children. If they ever become decathletes, I don't want to coach them, right? I don't, God bless, your parents did it better than anybody. I don't want to coach Ashton and Bree's children. Just come on, man. Your parents did it. How could I ever top that? What was it like coaching Lee with an involved dad, and I think properly involved? So I'm not talking about Lee, Tom being overly, we've had parents that are overly and too involved and not involved in the right places. Tom comes with his own expertise and help for you as a still learning coach at that point. What was it like knowing, man, I'm coaching the daughter of world record holder, who's very talented too, by the way? It's not like, oh yeah, she didn't get the genes. She got the genes. What was that like? Advantages, disadvantages?
Definitely advantages. And, it's one of those situations where you got to take the ego out of the equation. At the end of the day, it's trying to find the best course of action for the athlete. And a my way or the highway as a coach, a lot of times isn't going to work at this level. And, I'm still developing, my javelin repertoire and having Tom and having those influences and having the conversations on the phone and, going over training programs, fall, winter, spring, peaking cycles, conditioning, plyometric drills, throws counts, different drills with med balls. Again, those early couple of years at Illinois State, kind of set the foundations to what I still do today. And if you go into a situation like that with ego and you want to pretend like you know it all and you don't at least take in the advice of a 4-time Olympian, you're not doing your athletes any services. So I think it's just taking out the ego and understanding that, there's 20 plus years of experience here. There's a couple of things that, I kind of want to do this way, but understanding why are you doing something? How are you doing it? And do you need to do it? And are there better ways to do it? And a lot of times Tom understood where I wanted to go with something. And he would show me, well, I get this, but why don't you think about doing it this way? And little light bulbs start to click off in your head and training just becomes more steamrolled. You take out the busy work, and a lot of things about collegiate training is busy work, just doing things for the sake of doing things and wasting time doing things when you can spend more time, developing something else or spending less time doing it all and allowing for more recovery time to the athletes. Do you need to do everything that you're doing? Do you need to train them for 2.5, 3 hours a day? Is there a purpose? Is there a focus? I got a lot of that from Tom is, have a meaning for everything that you do and try to find the easiest ways to do it that accomplish the goal.
I think COVID taught us that lesson really well as far as how much we do with our athletes. Absolutely. So before I ask my next question, though, it does make me think, when you get to Illinois State, are we done with the long runs with our javelin throwers? Did that stay down?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
That stayed down in Louisiana.
Just want to make sure that stayed down there. All right, good. Now, for anybody who knows Tom Petronoff, he's a character, and I mean that in all the good ways. I have a very good relationship with him, love him, business and personal, professional relationship with him. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Are there any stories, because that's very unique, dad, coach, daughter, any unique stories, funny stories that are appropriate to be told on recording that you can think of with Tom and Lee and just that crew that you had there as it relates to
a lot of stories we probably can't talk on recording for sure. Some of those earlier days in his training life for a different time. But I do remember the first time I met him. I think we were prepping for a USA championship or a regional championship meet, and he came to visit Lee. I believe is that maybe that second year, and he came out to a training session to watch. And we were doing some things on the runway, and she hit a really good clean throw. And I was just standing right there filming, and all of a sudden his big barely chest just comes in, and he gave me this huge chest bump and almost knocked me down in the grass because he was so excited that she was starting to prep and getting good throws. I believe that was the year that she was a first team All-American. He came down and watched the training session, and out of the blue, I got about chest pumped right down to the ground.
I can see that. He's a big boy, so I can see that.
Yep.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. We had a lot of success with her and a lot of fun times coaching her and working alongside Dad with that one. Another person that I do want to talk about, because I'd be remiss, great friend of mine, former coworker of mine here at Gill Athletics, former top 10 javelin thrower in the NCAA, by the way. We just had a crush of really good javelin throwers come out here in the last few years, is Mr. Tim Glover. Now, Tim was a Bloomington kid. We talk about Illinois not having javelin, but he was from right there in Bloomington, Illinois. His dad was the school record holder at Illinois State in the javelin as well. So he kind of came up throwing the javelin. You helped coach Tim, I think, when he threw his big PR in college, number 3 or 4 all time, I believe, somewhere in that range, but also to 2, and I call it 2.5 national championships, 2 outright championships. And then his senior year, he got second. So I call it 2.5. I just give him credit there. What was it like? I mean, that may be for a lot of people, that's a once in a lifetime athlete. What was it like working with Tim? And please tell me any deep, dark secrets so that I can message him and hold them over him.
There weren't too many. I would categorize Tim as being one of those dream athletes. He was bought in, from the get-go. If you had something written down on paper, told the kid to do something, he was going to do it, and he didn't question. He just had the firm belief that we were there to get better and to try to win championships. So I know that his first goal was just to break his dad's school record in the javelin. I think that was really all he kind of wanted to do. There was a little bit of hectic training as that first year as a freshman. Obviously, the approach has never been Tim's long suit. His arm and the way he blocks and his rhythm and the crossovers are what has made him great. And I remember that freshman year, our biggest emphasis was trying to develop our approach, trying to bring in some speed into the crossovers and the throw. And first meet of his freshman year, he hits probably a 25-foot PR. You've thrown 204 in high school. We open up at about 69 meters, 68 meters. And he threw out his back a little bit, and that cost us some time. Through that back injury leading up to the Missouri Valley Conference Championships, we kind of developed that little trot in 7, the little trot in 9 step that, basically we used for the next couple of years. But that ultimately was set him up. But Tim was a dream athlete. If you told him to jump off the cliff and he thought that was going to make him better, he would have jumped off the cliff. There was a lot of crazy things that we did, whether it was over speed work, crossovers, running down a hill, and me pulling him on bungees and things like that. I'm sure Tim can tell you some stories. I know he did an interview one day saying that there was a lot of crazy stuff Coach Whitsitt and I did, and that's when I took that Oregon job. And I think he enjoyed doing some of that stuff outside of the box.
Yeah, you call him a dream athlete. I call him a dream teammate. He was amazing working with us here at Gill Athletics and left to pursue his dream of making Team USA and then made the world champs team. I mean, that's no small feat, man. I love him to death. And
so there was one story, and this is after he won his first national championship. So his sophomore year, wins national championship on his first throw of the competition, huge PR. But we're going through the next season, and everything's great. Training's going awesome. He's looking like $1 million. And of course, as a coach, you got to realize what's the date and month, April 1st. Tim shows up to practice wearing basically a cast and walking on crutches. And the panic in my mind that ensued, and those kids got a pretty good laugh out of that. But Tim got me good one on that April Fool's joke. Panic.
That seems like a standard athlete to coach April Fool's joke. That's great. Yeah, I love that. I can totally see him pulling that off too, because he's so very even keel. So anything he presents to you, you feel like is the truth. I mean, he's not a boisterous. He's not going to overdo it. So if he comes to you with a broken arm, it's like, dang, my guy broke his arm.
And if you look at his keepers list, there's going to be an indoor competition, I believe, his sophomore year, and he's got a shot put mark and a 35-pound weight throw mark on there. So Tim always wanted to try the other events. And his sophomore year, I said, "You're never going to throw the shot put. You're never going to throw the weight." And we made a bet. I'm like, "Tim, if you can win the national championships in javelin, sure, I'll enter you in an indoor meet." And so the sucker went out there and won the national championship. And I had to let him throw shot put in the weight throw at an indoor competition. Yep.
Do you think he would have been a pretty good hammer thrower?
His body and his build,
Yeah.
I definitely could have seen him throwing hammer for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what, when I look at him, I'm like, he's not actually a prototypical javelin thrower, to be real frank, but he's real strong. I was like, oh, if he would have been able to learn the rhythm, I feel like he would have been a really good hammer thrower too.
Tremendous core power, and the back that he had on him, his back and his legs, for sure. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, I know Tim's going to be listening to this. So Tim, love you to death, man. I'm so happy for world champs, man. Come on, dude. You're in a fraternity this big. It's quite amazing. I'm so proud of you, and really so proud to call you a friend, man. Really, really am.
I was happy that he did that. There was only 2 events that I went out there to go watch at the World Championships when I was still out in Eugene, and that was Tim throwing the javelin and Jillian Weir throwing the hammer for Team Canada.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So at Illinois State, and there are many other. Kurt Jensen, by the way, is another former teammate here at Gill. Worked on our Porter side. Super smart, super charismatic. Was a tremendous thrower. Looked the part with his big old beard, and he was a Viking all the way. Unbelievably strong. He went into kind of strength, powerlifting type stuff after he went back up to Wisconsin, and I mean, he's just a phenomenal specimen. I love Kurt Jensen. So, and you mentioned Brittany. There's a lot of value. You had an unbelievable crew there. How long were you there at Illinois State?
3 seasons, 2009 through the 2012 year.
Okay, so we gotta address this. So 2 years at McNeese, 3 years at Illinois State. Lots of success, especially at Illinois State. I mean, national titles, many points. And usually I ask the question, well, where'd you go and why'd you leave? But you went to Oregon. So I think maybe for most of us listening, it's like, well, it's obvious why you left. You go to Oregon. But, and I know you had a lot of success here. Oregon is, first of all, you're Power 5 automatically, right? You're Pac-12. You're Oregon, you're Nike University, whatever. All you at least have the assumption from the outside that everything is taken care of: budget, travel, recruiting, branding, etc. When you go to recruit, those kind of things. But you only did year 5. I mean, you're a pup. You're a redshirt senior, if you will, as a coach. Any concerns when Oregon comes calling, and they come calling you, by the way? You don't apply to Oregon. Oregon calls you. Any concerns, or was it just pure excitement of like, oh, okay, no more excuses because everything is available to me there when I go to Oregon? What was your thought when Oregon calls?
And that was the biggest anxiety. There is 2 parts. My wife's 2 years, younger than me in her schooling. So when they approached me about that job at the 2012 Olympic trials, I was out there with 4 of our throwers from Illinois State. And that's, when they first approached me, understanding that my wife was going to have to stay in Illinois for another year to finish her student teaching, there was that anxiety, but then also knowing that that's the type of position that you have a bad year, 2 bad years, and, it's not your choice. And you're right. When you have everything possible, at your disposal, it comes down to the coaching and the athletes. And at the end of the day, the coaching is who brings in the athletes. So really, it just comes down to the coaching. So if there's a year or 2 in there that it's not getting done, that responsibility, fully falls on your shoulders.
Did you have any misconceptions going into Oregon? And let me give you an example of what I might mean there. Again, there's a difference between being on the outside looking in and then being on the inside of it. And I remember visiting one year, and it was jumps practice, and the head coach was the jumps coach, and he was out there turning the pits himself. And I remember saying to him, I was like, Coach, no one will ever believe me that the head coach of Oregon is out turning his own pits. They all think you have everybody who does everything. And we know Oregon has a lot of resources, so I'm not saying Oregon doesn't. But there's this conception that at Oregon, everything is done for you. You need your practice set up, there's a manager for that. You need pits turned over, there's a manager or staff for that. That's not the case necessarily at Oregon. Was there any misconception you had that had to the myth had to get popped real quick when you arrived in Eugene?
No, absolutely. We had facilities workers that, obviously took care of the grounds and the facilities. But in reality, we didn't have any team managers. Kurt Taylor was setting up the hurdles for hurdle practice. Jamie Cook was setting up the hurdles. I'm out there drawing sector lines and moving my equipment and things like that. When it came down to acid wash and rings, we would work on the rings. Every kind of coach, basically took care of, their own event group and hauling equipment in and out and making sure everything was prepped for the kids. Now the luxury is, for meet time, we had a great officials association and our grounds people were world class. And so, it set up the facilities fantastic in terms of the paint lines and all that stuff. At Illinois State and McNeese, I was out there drawing my own sector lines. But the overall budget, a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people think that Oregon has everything at their disposal, and I do think over the last couple of years it's gotten substantially better. But now being out here in the SEC and looking at the budgets and things like that are operating in the SEC, Oregon wasn't even close. Maybe we chartered one flight a year, to a national championship meet or something like that, and everything else was busting up to Seattle, Washington, or flying coach somewhere. So I think it gets lost in the whistles and the bells because the facilities are, phenomenal. And you see the face value of the facilities, but some of the inner workings, those first couple of years, you're right. We had to do a lot of things on our own and our, whether it was equipment budget or travel budget or things like that, probably didn't compare to, a lot of schools, especially in the SEC.
And forgive me, I didn't even mention his name. And the head coach, now former head coach at Oregon, Robert Johnson, is the guy that I was talking about, the jumps coach. And Robert was very good to me during his time at Oregon. So I just wanted to correct that. I did not mention Robert's name. I have nothing but great reverence and love for Robert Johnson, and he did a phenomenal job. I mean, look at the jumpers that came out there. And his story is another great story, coming from App State. I'd love to explore his story one day, but just, shout out to Robert Johnson. Like I said, always good to me. So I have a lot of love right back for Robert there as the head coach there at the University of Oregon. So Eric, did you take over? Was Lance Deal? Is that when he retired and went to facilities, or did you take over for someone else?
Robert Weir. So I believe Lance,
yes.
Lance had stepped down in 09 and they had Robert Weir there in 10, 11.
Okay, that's right. How could I forget legendary Robert Weir? I had Lance Deal in the brain because Gill podcast alum Lance Deal, love Lance a lot, that we've had here on the podcast, and then went and did a phenomenal job of overseeing the facility there at Hayward, and was really instrumental and helpful for us as we did Olympic trials and NCAA championships there at Oregon. So just love Lance. I always want to give Lance a shout out. So what was it like? Again, there's this misconception, not conception, misconception that everything is just perfect at Oregon. We all have to remember that no matter where you're at, high school, college, big college, small college, whatever, every school has their own issues. There's not just carte blanche. Oregon just doesn't sign everybody on full rides because they've got everything, blah, 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 blah. And they got every pole in every series and every shot put in every diameter. And, there are limits everywhere. There are budgets. There's finite resources out there. What was it like the first time? So kind of thinking back to your first time at McNeese, the first javelin practice of like, all right, I got to figure this out. First Illinois State practice of like, okay, these guys are pretty good. We can make them better. And then now at Oregon, you walk into Hayward. That's your practice place now. That's your home. What was it like that first week, 2 weeks of practice of finding your groove now in the Pac-12?
It was definitely exciting. And I think what allowed me to adjust so quickly is again, my wife had to stay out at Illinois State and finish her last year of student teaching. So I'm out in Eugene, Oregon, by myself with unlimited amount of time, and showing up for weights at 6:45 in the morning and staying in the office until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, that first year, 5 days a week, and then still having practice on Saturday. probably the most hours I've ever worked in my career was that first year at Oregon, trying to get in tune with the landscape. Obviously, managing the personalities of the athletes. You go from coaching Tom Petronoff's daughter at Illinois State to coaching Scott Skipper's son and Dean Krauser's son and Robert Weir's daughter at Oregon. So managing those high level type of athletes and developing relationships as fast as you can to ultimately try to provide the best opportunities for them to have success and to excel at Oregon.
I didn't think about that. You have really coached some family legacy people. You mentioned the Skippers and the Krausers, two family names in Oregon that are revered. Knowing both families really well, parts of each members. Mitch Krauser is a good friend of mine. Greg Skipper is a friend of mine, and it's just those family lineages are. I mean, there's some school top 10s that don't have an equal top 10 of these families in the throws. So, and then the Weir, yeah, you've kind of, I didn't even think about this, but you've really made an impact on family legacy coaching, if you will. That's tough.
And it goes back to, my development. I don't know how many lunches or dinners, talking with Dean and, still talking to Scott, Scott and I and Greg still, probably conversate, at least once or twice a month, even now that I'm gone. But, taking those insights of those, not just dads, but coaches as well. Scott coaches, Dean coaches, high school kids and have developed high school kids and taking some of their experiences and, seeing where it fits in with your ideology of throwing, again, has just been another piece in my coaching development.
Yeah, that's really unique. I had Petronoff in my head, totally forgot Skippers and Krausers and Weirs. Yeah. So, along the way of your journey, you mentioned the word ego several times, and I've said it every time it comes up in the podcast here. Ego is not bad. Bad ego is bad. And we share, I'm gonna say, a similar experience in the sense that my whole career when I coached, I was all to get to the SEC. I'm from Alabama, so I have no problem saying I'm an SEC homer. I mean, I think the SEC has the best. If they had tiddlywinks in NCAA, SEC would be the best tiddlywinks conference. I mean, we're just the best conference out there. So my whole goal was to get to the SEC, and I go from Ball State to Mississippi State. I made it, and that was actually my problem. I had made it. I had arrived. You had a much better attitude than I did. But what I'm curious about, when I got to Mississippi State, my bad ego, played into it, thinking, oh, now that I've arrived, now that I'm in the SEC, recruiting, I was a big recruiter, recruiting is going to be so much easier. When I was at Ball State, and I compare that to an Illinois State, when you called recruits, first of all, there was probably a line of recruits you didn't call. You maybe kind of just assumed for time and efficiency, I'm not going to get the number one thrower in the country. At Ball State, I certainly didn't call the number one high jumper in the country, unless they were from Indiana, and I'd give it a shot. But again, there was no shot, right? But I had to explain who Ball State was, where we were, what a great school it was, etc. Maybe you had to do that at Illinois State. I assumed when I got to Mississippi State, as soon as I said, hey, this is Coach Mike Cunningham from Mississippi State, oh, it was over. It was a wrap. You knew who we were, what conference we were in. You automatically assumed I was a great coach because I was at SEC. And I remember one of the first recruits I called, LZ Coleman. He ended up actually at Simplot games. You mentioned Simplot earlier. Set the indoor high school national record in the 400. So this kid was a stud. His SEC material kid. And after I established some bonding and rapport with him over a few weeks, I asked him, so LZ, who are you looking at for your top five? Back then we only had 5 visits, right? That's about to change. Who's your top 5? And I distinctly remember him going, oh yeah, University of Florida, USC, Baylor, and I think it was Texas, I think. And I remember there was a pause. I didn't know what to say because I was like, oh, wait a minute. I've got to go beat Mike Holloway. That guy's my mentor. Like I ask him questions. Like I need a Mike Holloway. Wait. I got to beat Los Angeles. I'm in Starkville, Mississippi. Oh, wait a minute. I've got to beat Quarter Miler U. What this guy? Oh, wait. This didn't get easier. This just got a whole lot harder. Do you remember your first major recruit? I mean, again, at that level, every recruit's a major recruit. But do you remember the first time you called someone on behalf? I'm Coach Eric Whitsitt of University of Oregon, and they talked to you about other visits they were taking. Was there a sense of like, oh, okay, well, this ain't Illinois State no more. That's no diss to Illinois State. But what was your reaction that first time that like that reality maybe hit you or became a reality for you?
In some ways, recruiting at Oregon was, to be honest, the easiest in terms of opening doors. I would say that a majority of the kids that I ended up calling called me first. So kids were contacting me, getting an early step in the door by sending emails and contacting me first. After those legacy kids graduated, those skippers, Weirs and Krausers, the biggest aspect was funding in that event area. Oregon, is primarily distance and had developed some sprints, and the throws were getting some good support. And then you started to invest in the jumping areas. That took away from some groups. There was probably 3 or 4 seasons there that maybe we had one combined scholarship total between the men and women. So that ended up being the biggest headache is trying to find the best athlete and trying to figure out trying to find kids on academic money, trying to, yeah, this kid's really good, but I don't have a shot to sign him because really we don't have the money to invest in that area. So maybe we go after a kid a couple of notches down that's going to get $6,000 to $10,000 academic money. So that started to be the biggest hurdle is trying to find good talent that had money, from other avenues.
Hey,
It was a tremendous benefit that Oregon was a javelin throwing state.
oh yeah, sure.
That was a huge benefit. We had a male at the national championship meet in every year I was there, and a female athlete probably 6 or 7 years combined with the male athlete. So having javelin there really helped make the job a little bit easier. Because you could get those kids, for fairly cheap, being in-state kids, and Oregon being a big name brand, and obviously getting in-state tuition. But Oregon's out-of-state tuition at the time, to bring in a top-level kid and not have to have not have big money for them. That was the biggest difficulty.
Hey, and that's a great point about those. Every school has their issues. That's a great point. By the way, even though it's Oregon, you still only had 12.6 scholarships, and you only had 18. And great point about the cost of out-of-state cost for the university there, along with cultural issues, right? Meaning that Oregon, I'm going to do air quotes, but they're very soft in the air quotes, needs to win in the distance because of its legacy and history and tradition there on the West Coast and specifically in Oregon. They are looked at that they quote unquote have to have a distance program. So maybe more scholarships are going into the distance side versus throwing, et cetera. So yeah, those are really good points about the, again, outside looking in, it's like, well, how come they didn't have every great thrower in the world? It's like, well, first of all, I got this many scholarships, and guess what? The kids I'm recruiting are pretty good, so they can go anywhere to get a lot of scholarship as well. And I like how you brought up about, and this is a conception / misconception. You brought up that maybe one of the real advantages there was recruiting was easier in the sense of a lot of kids were reaching out to you because of the brand. The brand of Oregon is extremely strong in sports, but really strong also in the niche of track and field. But the kids that you're recruiting, and not just in throws, but overall in the program, any kid that's being looked at by Oregon for any amount of scholarship is also being recruited by, I'm going to exaggerate here, but
everybody else,
100 other schools, right? In fact, I remember having this conversation with Carol Smith Gilbert, then head coach at USC and now at University of Georgia. Phenomenal person, another person that really needs to be on the podcast. Love her journey, good friend. And I remember touring the USC facilities, and she's telling me how much, again, cost. And it's private, so there is no in-state, out-of-state there. So there's a misconception of why isn't USC winning every time? Well, God bless, they have their own issues, right? So she was telling me the cost and things like that, and I was like, and they have their own issues with their track facility. So Oregon has a very, especially now, closed down, like that you have full control over your facility. USC's is maybe the exact opposite. The band uses it, the community uses it, etc. And so I asked her, I remember we were walking with Quincy, now head coach at USC. And I was like, well, then, if you're recruiting a kid here at USC, Carol, well, that means, they can go to Oregon, Texas, Tennessee, whatever great, programs, Florida, et cetera, that you can name. They can also go there. Like if you're recruiting them, that means they're, the other guys and gals are also looking at them. Why do they go to school at USC? And there was other factors. It was, some other academic and things like that factors. What were those other factors for you at Oregon when you recruited a kid that, maybe was getting a full ride at XYZ University, but because of limitations of scholarship, et cetera, you could only offer a quarter or less? What were the other selling points for you as a coach to get those kids there?
Primarily the facilities. I know a lot of schools and coaches, and they recruited the weather out there. It is pretty rainy, and you don't see the sun for quite a few months. But at the end of the day, it's about training and the belief in you can be great. And look at what we did there. Those 10 years with the type of weather we had. Not even having a training facility for 3 years as they built Hayward Field. So it's more about the belief in the whys and the whats and the hows you're doing something. If you want to be great, it's not necessarily the fancy facilities or the weather or things like that. But you're right. The name brand at Oregon is huge. I think the allure of that's where Nike was created. Having that type of relationship with Nike and having Nike there in Beaverton. But knowing that an Oregon coach and an Oregon distance runner helped found that company and then the relationship that it still has. I think it plays a big draw in why kids want to come to Oregon. That connection.
Yeah, I forgot you brought up the weather, and what I love about that is I actually like to kind of like bring down the lore of schools, and Oregon's a great example of that. Not because I'm a hater or anything. I'm definitely a fan of Oregon for many reasons, but what I like to do is I want people to realize that winning is hard, no matter where you are. And because of that, when you can understand that truth, that there's only one national champion every year on the men's side, one on the women's side. There's only one national champion shot putter, et cetera. There's only one. Winning is hard. And so when you can accept that as a truth, that means that coaching is extremely important. That like I like to bust the myth that at an Oregon or now at a Tennessee SEC school that, oh, well, Eric just got the best kids in the world, and all he had to do was just drive the whole I'm just a bus driver thing. He just had to drive the bus. That's not true. While you certainly got talented kids, first of all, you had to overcome a lot. That Oregon is not perfect. Oregon has its advantages, but it's not perfect. And you had to recruit against some other schools that had advantages versus an Oregon, and also disadvantages, but advantages. LA has better weather than Eugene. Sorry, that's just a fact. So not only did you have to overcome that, you had to recruit your butt off to still get kids at Oregon. And then when they got there, no matter how good they were, you had to coach your butt off to make them All-Americans, national champions, and eventually national championship team. I remember coming up to Robert when you guys won indoors at Texas A&M, 2017, 18, somewhere around there. You won on the women's side, you won by a huge margin, like 30 points, which is, for nationals, is just it's crazy. And I remember going up to Robert and I was like, hey, a lot of people are going to say, well, how easy was this? You won by 30. I know you won by 30, and it was not easy. It is hard. Things have to go perfect. Other things have to not go perfect for other teams. It's unbelievably hard. So I love this. Again, not the busting of the Oregon myth, but of the realization that, hey, other coaches that are looking at when you were at Oregon and going, oh, Eric, of course you had these All-Americans. You had everything there. Sorry, folks, there was still a lot of hard work. And one of those hard works, and you brought this word up a lot, is the circuits. And again, we don't talk X's and O's here, but it feels like outside looking in that this is really where your coaching philosophy kind of came around on circuits. Like I remember these, the big tires, and I don't know that you had big tires at Illinois State, but I know you had them in Oregon, and just kind of this blue collar work ethic. Like, okay, sure, we've got Hayward, and it's amazing, but we're going to put in work here. Is this where circuits as a philosophy started coming into, and also maybe connect that to personally for you, because this is where the physical health of you really started kicking in, again, at least from the outside looking in.
No, absolutely. We started the strongman circuits where I had 8 to 10 foot logs that we would basically fingal thicker over. We had tires that we flipped. I drilled handles into tires that we would farmer carry,
Mm.
pushing and pulling my truck. I remember, I think my second year there, I actually had Lance weld me a hook to put on the tow cables of my truck. And we put a hammer wire and a handle to that, and I would have two athletes in the front of my truck, backward hammer walking, my truck. Went to a local beer dispensary and bought a whole bunch of, or got donated a whole bunch of used kegs and water and sand in those kegs. And, finding strength movements through mobility, I think is key. And that's a philosophy of mine that, is stuck with me is getting strong through movement. Sure, static strength in the weight room, your squats, your deadlifts, are just fine. Obviously you're going to get strong, but we're moving when we're throwing. There's not a single throwing event where you're standing in a vertical plane. So developing ways to train and strengthen ligaments and tendons and strengthen lower backs through pretty intense hard ways of movement is something that I'm really big on.
And
A
I know.
matter of fact, today I'm going out to a brewery to pick up our first set of kegs here. Starting at Tennessee so late in the year, basically getting here a week before practice. We missed a lot of what we do on my fall prep work. So there was a lot of things I had to improvise here this first year. Just getting thrown in so quickly. But these kids are going to find out in a hurry this summer and next fall what we're all about. So I'm going and picking up the tractor tires this week and going to the dispensary and getting our various size kegs to fill those with water and sand, and we're getting back to the granite pound.
I love your strength in a movement philosophy, if you will. And while I know you're not the only person that does that. However, I do believe from coaches that I talk to, and again, I'm always on Twitter, so I'm seeing how people are training. It is still a fairly unique aspect. A lot of us are, as throws coaches and strength coaches, are very big on weight room. Like that's a huge, and it's part of it. We're not saying you don't do weight room. It's a part of, but you do a lot of functional movement type of strength for your throwers. Do you, and I just don't know, Eric, do you speak a lot on that? Like whether it's through podcast or at state clinics or USTFCA. I mean, that would really benefit the throwing community, coaches specifically.
I haven't, a majority of my career, I've kind of just kept my head down and
Yeah.
just done my own thing and just trying to go out there and get the kids better and compete. I wouldn't be opposed to now, a little later on in my career. And again, this goes back to the ego part of things, but sharing some of that knowledge and some of those things with other people, definitely wouldn't have a problem doing that moving forward. But primarily, I've always kind of kept things relatively close to the belt.
Yeah, you're really unique in that aspect, Eric. And I can say this as someone who's seen you, inside the track and outside the track. You know, you portray. If I only saw you at track meets and maybe at practices, you portray a very extroverted type of personage, right? Like you're loud, you're competitive, lots of movement, things like that. But I thought I knew this, and I was right, but I wasn't sure. You're not on the USTFCA circuit, if you will. Talking about your training, you are also very introverted in that sense. Your family life is very private, things like that. It's just a unique aspect of this. It's actually, we think of extroversion and introversion as a light switch, like, oh, you're either extroverted or introverted, and it's actually, there's a spectrum. There's actually a very good term for someone like you. It's called ambivert. It's someone who can play on both sides, but that also means both sides can be tiring as well. Extroverts, introverts can do extroverted activity, but it tires them out very quickly. They need to get back into introversion very quickly. So someone who's an ambivert can do both, but that means both also tire them out kind of quickly
Yeah.
as well.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm a very emotional type of guy, and my emotion doesn't just pour out on me. It's, I'm out there hoorahing and jumping up and down in a practice session when the kid does what I do, tell him to do. So that screaming and fire and yelling when you see me, one of my athletes hit a big throw at those big meets, that's probably my week to week at practice. And definitely some athletes cup of tea and some not. I've had some kids that kind of wanted a little bit more mellow, and I've got to catch myself and realize that this kid likes their practice setting to be a little bit more calm, cool, and collected. But I exert a lot of energy when I coach, whether it's through demonstration or vocal, or just a lot of fist pumps and high fives and jumping up and down. And that's just not limited to the big time championship meets. I'm who you see at those meets probably every day of the week out at practice. And a lot of times when I get home, it's using that remaining amount of energy and realizing that your family needs a little bit of your time as well. I was talking to somebody last week and said, now my son's 7 and my daughter's 3. You start to realize that you spend your day to day more with other people's kids than you do your own. I'm usually up and at weights before they even wake up. And they go to bed at 8. The typical day, I might get home at 6. We sit down and have dinner from 6 to 7, and you might have an hour to play some Mario Kart or talk about the day's going, and then they go to bed. So I tried to the weekends and things like that. I haven't gone to those coaches conventions in a long time, and I'm not flying out and doing conventions and doing a lot of speaking because those Saturdays and Sundays, inside of the year when you're not traveling, or in the summertime, I got to get back to my family.
Yeah, I respect that a lot. Like, and you know that that's part of my passion for coaches is that's the relationship health. And I saw a tweet just yesterday. It really was one of those like, kind of hit you like kind of almost like a sucker punch type of a tweet. I think it was from a strength or a football coach. Actually, it wasn't a track coach. And they were essentially they were saying how very stereotypically a coach will say we're family with our athletes and things like that, and then they'll dismiss their own family. They'll be gone every weekend. Your wife and your children get 1% of you, and you give 99% to your job, coaching track and field. And the tweet was essentially saying you're saying your family, well, we see how you treat your family, so like you're showing your reality of what family is. Like, it's not this kumbaya, we're seeing how your actual family is treated. It was really like it was a gut puncher for, I think, for coaches of like, man, this is your job. And I know it's your passion, and I'm very passionate about my job as well, but it's your job, your family. That's different. And we've got to do a better job as a coaching body of being present with our spouses, being present with our families at all turns, not when we can, at all turns. And then, our job is what we do. And again, it's a unique job being a coach. I understand that. At the end of the day, it's still a profession that gives you money to take care of your family, your passions, your charities, etc. So, all right, let me step off that soapbox there. But appreciate, I just like your unique, and I just wanted to encourage you as it fits in with your family time first and foremost, of just speaking out. Your training it's been developed very uniquely. It's been crafted uniquely with your own personality and experiences, and I just think there's a lot that other coaches, specifically in the strength and throwing world, could learn, and we could continue to raise up the throwing community, which is throwing out their mind right now, by the way, on all levels, high school and college and professionally. It's just, everybody talks about the shoes in track and field right now. Well, they ain't wearing those shoes throwing people, and the throws are equally crazy right now. There's no event right now in track and field that's not just bonkers, but the throwers are certainly holding their own in each and every one of their events. Okay, so Eric, let's start transitioning to today. You're at the University of Tennessee, and I'm going to let you share how you want to share the transition from Pac-12 to SEC, from Oregon to Tennessee.
It was definitely a tough time, going out the way you did, but sitting back, you got to realize the opportunities that you had over the last decade. Coming off of a season where you've coached a world champ in the shot and in bronze in the disc and several All-Americans as freshmen and sophomores, you definitely finding another job was not on the mindset. So things happened pretty quickly. Was pretty darn stressful after the NCAA championships. But again, fortunate enough to have spent, 10 years at Oregon, and ultimately that meant something. There was a lot of opportunities and a lot of different jobs to, look through and sift through. Tennessee when Tennessee called. Obviously that type of program was up my alley, a program that could still contend for national championships. But then ultimately everything kind of fit into place. The location in Knoxville, we're big outdoors people. We love to camp and fish and hike and hunt. That's something that we do any given moment that we can, and having the Smoky Mountains and the rivers out here was huge. And then coming out here and meeting Coach Ross, definitely probably one of the most down to earth people, tough when he needs to be, but somebody that has unwavering trust in you as a coach and as a staff to do your job. Somebody that's not hovering over you, but just gives you the rope that you need to be successful. So, it was an easy decision when we took our interview out here, the right fit for our family, and seeing ourselves being able to try to build this program up to a championship caliber program.
Yeah, I love your story. And I love your story because of, I don't want to say where you landed, but where you are today, which is a great place. And you mentioned Dwayne Ross, who is a dear friend of mine, love him to death. Gill podcast alum as well from when he was at NCA&T. In fact, we've had several. I think you're like maybe the fourth Tennessee coach. So Dwayne,
I know you had Carlson on there.
Yep. Carlson came
He's
on.
He's a great guy too.
Yep. Great guy, and we talked a lot about the uniquenesses there at Tennessee and coming from Notre Dame. His North Central grad, so there's another
fiery. He's competitive.
Coach. Yeah, unique how you're setting up the distance events in cross country teams there at Tennessee. We had former Tennessee head coach Beth Alfred Sullivan also on the show as well, which another just great insights into the coaching community. For your story here, I like to use it as a cautionary tale. And what I mean by that is, when we get into, and a lot of it was, it's based off of what I told you about my desires of coaching. It was all to get to the SEC, right? A lot of times, and again, it's that outside looking in, whether we're a high school coach or non-Power 5 Division 1 or Division 2, JUCO, NAIA, we think, man, I want to coach the best. And that's not bad, but that means I need to be at the SEC or the Pac-12, Power 5. I need to be at Division 1. And we forget that there's a lot of things that go on these levels. And for you, Eric, I'm not sure in the 10 years that you were at Oregon that many coaches had a better 10-year block, a decade of coaching throwers on the collegiate level. As you mentioned, world champ that last year, many national points, many conference points, many conference championship teams that your athletes participated in, national championships, etc. It was an amazing 10-year slot. Like if that was your only resume, it'd be like, well, that's one of the top 5 resumes in this country. And through no fault of your own, you find yourself out. That's the cautionary tale. That's the tale that I think we need to learn from, is that not be careful what you ask for, but just know that when you get to that level, you could do everything right. And I don't know that you did everything right. Perfect is a hard level to attain, but you did a lot of things right. You did the vast majority of things correctly. You were a great person to work with. No one ever, and I know lots of people on that staff and former staff, no one ever was like, yeah, Eric's kind of a jerk. Nothing. Great person, great teammate to have on the coaching staff, etc. Your athletes speak very highly of you. Through no fault of your own, you find yourself out. And it's one thing, when I was coaching, it was before I got married and had children. It's one thing. I was coached for 10 years and I was at 5 different places. It's one thing when it's just you to move around. Now you find yourself married. You find yourself with 2 children. You own a house.
Just bought a house. Yep.
Just bought the house. And you find yourself unemployed. That's a tough situation to be in. And I know a lot of Americans deal with that on a daily basis, not coaches, just people in general. And that's so stressful. And you and I, as being friends, went through this process a little bit together. And I know the stress that you were in. And I know the stress you carried was really less about you and your professional career. And I remember almost every one of our conversations was about, oh man, Casey, oh man, the kids, what do we do about schooling? Where are they going to grow up? It was the stress of carrying the family on your shoulders. I truly believe that if you would have ended up at the smallest, the newest of program in the NIA JUCO, no kids, no program, you would have been completely happy as long as it was a good place for your family, paid enough to help the family to do the things that we need to do for the family, etc. The bad ego had been completely washed away at that point. There was no ego of like, well, gosh, I'm from Oregon, I should be able to go anywhere. It was like, man, what can I do for my family? And we won't even get into some of the other options that you even considered, options that were not in coaching, because it would have been right at that point for the family. So I just like to use your tales, that cautionary, just make sure you're getting into whatever level that you're at for the right reasons. And what I mean by that is it's a profession and you have your family, but also know that Eric did not affect young people positively more just because he was at Oregon. Whether he would have stayed at Illinois State, McNeese State, went to my alma mater at Troy, he would have had as much of a positive impact on young people there. He just at Oregon had different, what would be the word, different expectations. Like, okay, yeah, you need to have a positive student athlete experience because they are students there at University of Oregon and getting degrees, but we need those athletes to also perform at this level versus maybe a different stratum at Division III or NAI, et cetera. So just like to use that tale, and is so happy for your family that you landed at the University of Tennessee because it's a great school, it's a great athletic program, and for me, honestly, selfishly, because Dwayne Ross is there. I mean, I'm a big Dwayne Ross fan. So what's it like? You grew up, you're West Coast, you're Colorado. The closest you got to SEC was probably at McNeese because you're in LSU territory there. You're in the SEC, man. When I was there, 12 teams, you got 14 now. I hated the SEC conference meet. We were a pretty good team. We were a top 10 team at Mississippi State. We ran 3 flat and change in the 4x4 and never ran it at SECs. We were always pointing for nationals. What was it like that first SEC indoor championship, and then also outdoor? Just tell me, because it's phenomenal, that meet. So tell me your experience.
The biggest eye opening was there's no straggler points. There's no getting cheap fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth places. Our top 8 from hands down in every event is get to a mark that might get you to national championships. I mean, you're looking at 19 mid in the shot being fifth, sixth, seventh. It's 57, 58 meters, 59 meters in the discus being fourth, fifth, sixth. So the Pac-12, the top 3, 4 are usually pretty deep, and I made a name for it, cleaning up some of those straggler points there at the end with some developmental kids. But you find out in a hurry that the SEC is definitely more about polished talent. You can't take your time to develop a lot of talent out here long term if you're trying to win championships. It's a banger territory. The conference is the real deal for sure.
And I'm not taking away with the Pac-12 when I ask this next question, because the Pac-12 throws coaches they're legendary in their own minds. I'm not. Wait, that was a terrible. That's not how I meant that. They are legendary in their own ways, not in their own minds. Maybe some of them are, but they are awesome. Pac-12 coaches, throws coaches specifically, are amazing. Some of the greatest throws coaches around. SEC, I mean, you turn around and look at who's coaching Georgia throwers. Look who's coaching Florida throwers now. Look who's coaching Mike Surgeon at South Carolina. Doesn't get his due.
Ole Miss.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. John and Connie. Come on, man. Yeah.
Auburn. Pat Ebel. It's.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Ashley
Kovacs now at Vandy.
Dude.
Eric Whitsitt, Florida.
You might be the 8th best throws coach in the SEC, and you're top 5 in the country though.
Yeah, you might be right for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing. Every event in the SEC, including distance, by the way, and that's where they get the most, outside finger wagging, is important. Like, the sprints need to be Olympic caliber. The jumps need to be Olympic caliber.
The long and triple jump, that was just insane.
I can't wait to see this Arkansas kid at nationals. I mean, 12 stepping, 58 foot, one jump. Come on. And Travis Geffert, great I mean, come on, man. It's just amazing. When I was there, that was kind of like when I first walked into the first SEC, and it was just like, oh my God, these are my these, like, for me, it was, I was much younger in my coaching career than where you are now, but it was just like, man, these are my heroes. Like, these coaches are like I want to be them one day, and but I ain't got time because now I'm in their conference, so I got to be them today. And then walking out, maybe you go in thinking, oh, I can get these many points, and you walk out with maybe less. It's just a bloodbath. And
And
what
even what John Newell is doing at Arkansas with their
Oh
throws.
yeah, come on, John. Who's that's my birthday twin. We're both July 25th babies, man. I love John to death. What do you think about his? And again, this may not be a fair question because you're just finishing up. You're not even finished up your first year there. But when you think about that conference, so you've got two experiences, the indoor and outdoor conference meet, and within what is it, 2 years or a year, you've got Texas and Oklahoma coming as well. What is? I mean, does that excite you? Does that concern you? What's your feelings about this conference getting even much more terrible?
I mean, definitely not. I don't want to sound this in a bad way. I'm a competitive guy, so I'm not afraid of any school coming in or the type of quality that the SEC is now or that's going to become. I think indoors 18-20 and the shot put scored, and you look at Oklahoma, they got 3 or 4 guys over that mark, and Texas has got a guy over that mark. So you got 5 guys coming into the conference over what our 8th place scored in last year. But it's I think some things change in terms of recruiting. You're going after, the bangers. And if you don't find those bangers, realizing that you got Coach Ross in the hurdles and in the sprints, you got Tempest in the jumps, you got Carlson and his distance group, Ron Gardner, helping coaching those mid to long sprints and relays, taking, again, the ego and pride out of it, knowing that I don't have to have a throws group here or a big throws group presence for us to win. If it's not the right kid in the throws group that can help us score points, I got to pass. Maybe I don't have a kid this year. Maybe I don't have a kid next year. I've got one female thrower returning on our roster next year, and she'll graduate. I'm not going to fill that spot just for the sake of filling it. If it's not the right type of female that can come in and can develop and score quickly and make an impact quickly, I've got to defer to these other areas and let somebody else bring in a banger if they can to get the job done. So, and it's, again, letting go of your ego a little bit, realizing I'm not going to have a thrower represented in every throwing event. I'm not going to have a huge throw squad like I've been used to. It needs to be selective. The people that I bring in, need to matter and they need to fit in the right way. So, just trying to identify those bodies, I think is the biggest switch in mindset in terms of recruiting with where we're at in the SEC, and especially when Texas and Oklahoma join the conference.
Yeah, that's a great point about the ego and how much of a teammate you've got to be on that staff. Because you got to, I mean, the points are so scarce and so hard to get. You've got to get them where they can. So if 5 of the world's best throwers want to come to Tennessee, well, Dwayne has to figure out, okay, well, maybe I don't sign this throw or this distance kid, this sprinter or whatever, to make that happen. But on you as the individual coach, to that example you gave there on the women's side for a throw, and it's like, oh, I mean, I came here to coach. I'd like to coach a good number of people, but I also don't have time, money, resources for just anybody. They've got to be the right ones. So you've got to have that ego of just like, okay, well, we're not going to do anything in the throws this year. We're going to do everything we can, but I'll be the biggest cheerleader for the sprinters and the biggest cheerleader for the jumpers and the distance, and know that maybe next year I'll have that 1 or 2 or whatever number of kids that come through, and they've got to do the reverse. Now they've got to become the biggest cheerleaders of the throwing squad, etc. Really kind of shows you how the coaching staff has to be cohesive and walking step in step together to hit the goals of winning a conference title and winning a national title.
No, for sure, absolutely. And that's ultimately the goal here is to try to put the best product on the field for a net team national championship, on both genders. And to do that, it can come from a lot of different areas. And I think patience is going to be a key. Again, if I don't have a single female thrower on my roster here in 2 years, but we just brought in a 22-foot long jumper or a 46-foot triple jumper, or we've got a 6'2" high jumper, the points are the points. We're all eating together. It's not an individual focused team. We're trying to find the best talent in any event to come in. And if it's a year that the throws are a little bit down, or I can't get an athlete for the money allotted, we will go with the distance runner. At the end of the day, we're just going to field the best team we can each year.
I like that. We're all eating together. That's, and that shows the importance of head coach. Well, start with ADs, hiring a head coach, and then a head coach getting their staff together, that we're all eating together. So he or she's got to pick the right people to be on that staff. Because if one person decides they're going to try to go do their own thing, oof, the margin of error is very slim when you have goals like that. One coach not being eaten together, trying to eat at the other table, will wreck you quickly, really, really quick. Eric, as we wrap us up here today, and we touched on some of this a little bit, but what's got you excited, as you think about your family now in Tennessee and getting into school, and, again, still haven't even finished your first year. So you're still getting your feet underneath you, and maybe you still have to use GPS to figure out what the grocery store is and stuff like that. But what's got you excited as you start looking towards the future there as a Vol, and, one of the most historic programs there are with some of, again, in all events, I can think of, amazing people in each and every event that have come through the Tennessee program there in Knoxville that are legends, Hall of Famers, and coaches as well. What's got you excited as you think about one more year, 5 more years, etc.?
I think continuing the relationship building as a staff that we have, and the relationship building with the community and the people here. We were all thrown in so quickly that, it was work right off the bat. And going into next year, I think we all, learn a little bit more of each other's tendencies, when we're stressed out, when we're not, when we need to pick me up, and developing those relationships continuously as a staff, but getting out to the community, trying to bring the community back into the fold. But, the excitement is the development of this team, and trying to see what we can do over the next 2, 3, 4 years, with the men's team finishing third and the women's team finishing fifth. In the SEC, that's our best combined finish since 2008. And I think we left some points on the table. It wasn't necessarily a fully faceted meet for us. Definitely excited about the recruits that we have coming in, including a few throwers on the mid side, but recruits across the board, whether it's distance, jumps, sprints. So excited to get that new blood in, and start to feel like you're getting your own people in that kind of fits your style of training. And then getting back to, training how I've trained before, getting back into these circuits and the strongman training. And again, with a couple of athletes that I have returning that are on the team now that had a lot of progress. Really excited about our young female hammer thrower, Erik Chandler, phenomenal athlete that I've been fortunate to work with. But, by getting out into the community as a family, we found a great church that we're going to, and my wife goes and has a great support group on Wednesdays, and found some parents that have young kids like ours, and starting to get integrated into the community as a family. But I'm excited to get out there and try to figure out how to fish these rivers. A little bit different than Oregon.
Yeah.
Got a lot of bass and got a lot of catfish out here. I've gone out 5 times now. I'm over. Haven't even caught a throw me back. And for a guy like me that likes to get out and be competitive at whatever he does, and that's including going out there and catching some darn fish. I'm starting to get a little frustrated at that. So we're going to figure it out. Switch the tackle up, switch the spots up, but. Just excited to learn more about the area. We've been out to the Smokies, once or twice, but getting out there and getting some camping in, and getting some Tennessee fresh air in, and seeing what our new home's a little bit more about is definitely exciting. Still a lot of adventure left to be out here, even though we've been out here a year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I think, you brought up a good point about your own training. It's 1 year is long, but it's so short in the whole scheme of things. And to your point about getting there so late, the whole staff getting there so late into the season, really kind of almost like just trying to keep it together as we move along through the season. So to see you and your athletes have a full year of what you like to do, and have had success with, that'll be really exciting. And then, I'm just a big Dwayne Ross fan. I mean, he built something at Methodist, he built something at NCA&T, and so I have no doubts what he's going to build there at Tennessee, and with the staff that you guys have there, and the resources and administration supporting you along the way. I think something special. I don't think the other SEC and national caliber coaches are very happy to see all you guys together, because it's just another contender now that everybody's got to deal with, and it'll be exciting to see you guys continue to grow and foster your athletes and foster your family there in the Knoxville area, man. It's gonna be fun watching from the outside looking in, that's for sure.
No, absolutely. And I know as a staff, we're excited to be up for the challenge, see what type of damage we can get done. Arkansas reminds me of those Oregon days. They kind of seem like the juggernaut, but you put the right situation, the right people, the right talent together, you can start making waves, and that's what we're trying to do. We want to make some waves.
That's awesome, man. Well, Eric, thank you for being here today. It's always amazing to me. You're busy all year, and at this specific time of the year with SECs and regionals and nationals, and recruiting never stops, and USA's coming up, etc. Oh, and by the way, spending time with your family, getting schools ending for the kids, and getting ready for next, and all those kind of things, man. So I'm just so grateful for your time. It's not an easy podcast to listen to, right, dear listener? You've been here. We're coming on the hour and 50-minute mark, and you're still here. I'm just so impressed with your perseverance to hearing Eric's story. And Eric, again, it's not an easy podcast to be on. You got to start from the scratch, and we go through some difficult times. And I'm really, and I, knowing you as a friend, I knew you would be this way. Your authenticity and humbleness throughout your whole career, but especially the transition from Oregon to Tennessee. It's really good. It's what people need to hear. It's the value that is brought to the coaching body, sharing stories like this. So I'm just so thankful for you being open and authentic and humble with your story here with us today.
No, absolutely appreciate the invite to get on with you, and always love good chat and a chance to connect.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being here again this week. It's Nationals Week, Division I. We just had Division II and Division III. That was bonkers. I'm kind of speaking into the future. It's next week for me. I'll be in Colorado. Can't wait to see the D2 and D3 crews and what they produce, because they produce it's an amazing meet. And then we're going to go to Austin, which is guaranteed that it's going to be 120 degrees on the track. It's going to be hot. There's going to be a rainstorm that will cause a delay. Happens
multiple.
Multiple. Yeah, I'm being optimistic and saying just one, but it's going to be amazing. Austin is a fantastic host for the Nationals. It's going to be great, and we've already seen. We just got done with SECs. How about this for a conference meet? 4x1 winner sets the collegiate record. The 4x4, the top two teams. How do you like to get second and you break the college record, but you get second, break the collegiate record? Those guys, I bet you that was Alabama that got second. I bet you they're going to be out for revenge down in Austin. So it's going to be exciting from the very first event to the very last. And I hope you'll check it out I'm sure it's on ESPN this year or the NCAA website. You'll enjoy it. So thanks for being here. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again, and we'll uplift and honor the journey of a coach and bring some value to you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.